Hi everyone. We are just waiting 2 to 3 minutes before we get started, so to allow others to attend and connect. And we will be back in 2 minutes. Okay, welcome everyone. So I'm Heike Ritter and I will be your host for this webinar. Thanks everyone for joining and thanks for being part of our community. A few reminders before we start. The webinar is being recorded and will be shared publicly. The recording will be posted on our community at aka.ms/security webinars. During the webinar, please feel free to ask questions at any time by typing them in the live event Q&A window by clicking on Ask a Question button. Questions you post will be made publicly available, and if you prefer, you can post your questions anonymously by checking the box right below where you entered. We often get many questions during these kind of webinars, and we are doing our best to respond to all of them in real time. If the answer was not provided or if you have additional questions afterwards, please don't hesitate to ask them on our Microsoft Defender ATP forum at aka.ms/MDATPTC. If you are listening to this after the fact as a recording, you can also use this place to ask questions at any time. We love to hear your feedback on how we can improve these webinars, so please do so at aka.ms/security webinar feedback. And this is really important for us because we want to deliver the content you need, so let us know. If you haven't already, please join our community, same link, aka.ms/security community. And that's always the best way to ensure you don't miss any future webinars or major announcements when it comes to Microsoft security. In our community, you can speak directly to the engineering teams that actually build our security products. So for Microsoft Defender ATP, you can do that at aka.ms/MDATPTC. So today I'm super excited to have John Nieves and Steve Newby walking us through the journey of deploying Microsoft Defender ATP from hero to zero. No, from zero to hero. So I'm handing over to you guys.
Thanks, Heike. So hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're calling from. My name is John Nieves. I'm a program manager on the Microsoft Threat Protection and Microsoft Defender ATP engineering team. I'm joined today by my teammate, Steve Newby. Steve, quick little intro.
Yeah, I'm Steve Newby. I'm a program manager. John and I work in the same team, but different sides of the Atlantic. So I'm based UK and John's over in New York.
Thanks, Steve. So today, everyone, we're going to be talking about getting started with Defender ATP from zero to hero. And what that means is we'll take a fresh, clean environment tenant. We'll set it up, configure it with the preferred settings, and then onboard some endpoints so you can help protect your endpoints in your environment. That being said, let's level set the stage here on where we are and what the solution actually is. So Microsoft Advanced Threat Protection, Microsoft Defender Advanced Threat Protection is a complete endpoint protection platform that is hosted in the cloud. 100% in the cloud, and your endpoints are your sensor or your endpoints that report up to the cloud infrastructure. Each customer has their dedicated cloud infrastructure that no one can see outside of just the customer. And when it comes to infrastructure concerns, there is no infrastructure. Everything is hosted up in the cloud by us, Microsoft, and your endpoints are actually the infrastructure that you already need. The endpoints in question we'll be talking about mostly, and then some others as well, are the Windows 10 endpoints. Several years, about 3-4 years ago, when we decided to create our own EDR solution, we said moving forward with Windows 10, we were not going to bolt on any solutions. We were going to make all these solutions offering security components part of the operating system and allowing customers the ability to flip a switch and turn it on. So what this means is our sensor, because we are not an agent, is part of the natural Windows 10 kernel. Ever since the anniversary edition of Windows 10, our sensor is dormant, and then you send in instructions to that sensor, what we call onboarding, and that sensor wakes up and it asks what cloud tenant does it belong to, and it reports its data back to that tenant. Now, when you look at our overall Defender Advanced Threat Protection solution, as you can see, it's not just a basic EDR. Customers come to us and say, Microsoft, can you compare Defender ATP to my ABC EDR company? And it's so, as you can see, Defender is not, we can absolutely do that, but we're not just an EDR, traditional EDR. We are, like I said earlier, we're a complete endpoint protection platform. So we have a bunch of other components that are part of the solution that feed up into this cloud infrastructure. And now I'm going to highlight what those main components are, and then we'll dig a little bit deeper into all of them. So the first one we're seeing here is the threat and vulnerability management. What this is, since I talked about earlier having that sensor built into Windows 10, we give it instructions from the cloud to say, go grab and report back information on these endpoints. So what we do is the cloud tells the sensor to report and discover what applications are installed on the machine. And once we get the list of applications, we prioritize and analyze what applications and what vulnerabilities are present on these machines. And let's face it, every application known to man has some type of vulnerability. So we not just report back to customers saying, here are all your vulnerabilities and figure it out like other traditional TVMs. We actually say, okay, these are the vulnerabilities, but we want you to pay attention to this particular one or these particular vulnerabilities because they could be harmful in your environment, or we see them being used in an attack or a campaign around the globe. So we tell you what the vulnerabilities are, we prioritize which ones you need to go after, and then we help you mitigate which ones have to be addressed. So focusing on the ones that are there and telling you, yes, these are all the vulnerabilities, but these are the most important ones. Moving on to the next one is what we call attack surface reduction. Now, attack surface reduction is all of our pre-breach components built into the Windows 10 platform that we've added over the years and that we've learned from feedback from customers since the Windows 7 days. And a lot of these are the guards, what we call. So if you recall, obviously, credential guard, application guard, system guard, and exploit guard. These are all the components that we recommend customers turning on and saying, when you set up Windows 10, flip these switches, turn on these features. A lot of these have some really cool core components. So if you look at exploit guard, Exploit Guard has a bunch of features built into it, like an application control, some exploit protections, some network protections, and then some control folder access that helps prevents ransomware. One of the key components in attack surface reductions component is what we call an actual attack surface reduction rules, which are granular components instruction in the operating system that tell the operating system you should be, Mr. Application, you should perform in a certain way, but if you do something you're not supposed to be doing, or if you step out of your swim lane, I'm going to slap you saying, no, you can't do that. Go back to doing what you're supposed to be doing. These are today there's about 18 of those ASR rules built into the operating system, and they're off by default. And I'll talk more about them later on and show you how you set them up. But there's one is a feature that we highly recommend, along with all the other guards that customers actually set up during their rollout of the operating system or during afterwards. Moving on to the next-gen protection. So this is probably the oldest component of our security features. When this is what we used to be called Windows Defender. Now, I'm here to say that the old Windows Defender from years back, this is not the same. This is our next-gen protection. Little story here. Yes, I'm here to tell you we took the product from years ago and then we scrapped it and we re-engineered it from scratch. So I'm here to tell you that we do not, I repeat, we do not rely on signatures or DAT files. We use the power of our cloud. And as you can imagine, our cloud has vast amounts of telemetry. We get over 1 billion endpoints reporting back to us, and that's just Windows, not counting all the non-Windows and everything else and all our other services. So we use the power of the cloud, and what that means is we use our next-gen protection to analyze files. So any file coming into the system, we look at the hash and we say, hey, what's the determination of this file, good, bad? And if we don't know this file, we ask for a copy of the file. So we'll detonate it and then provide an outcome of that file. This is another built-in component of the operating system. It is another sensor. This sensor actually has about 7 different engines running inside of this sensor. So for disconnected mode, it protects the endpoints. Now we do send some very small signature files and some update engines to the local endpoints. So when they're offline or have no internet connectivity, we provide some absolute protection as well. But we do not rely on signatures or DAT files. We use the power of the cloud. And also provide tamper protection with Defender Next Gen protection. What that means is once it's on, it is extremely, extremely difficult to turn off or mess with or even disable. And moving forward with our industry standards, we have gotten great reports saying third-party testers have said, why bother paying or going with another one to use what Microsoft provides in box? Moving on to the next one is the actual core component of Defender ATP is the endpoint detection and response, or the EDR. Now this is the important piece. This is the core component of the overall solution. So like I said, every Windows 10 client has a sensor built in. How I like to recap this is imagine, so when you turn the sensor on, it's typically a black box for Windows. And what that means is we analyze here at Microsoft, we know the operating system pretty in depth. So we know what's good and bad, so we analyze every single little heartbeat of the operating system when we log a telemetry on that. And when we see something odd, we will send it up to that cloud tenant that we talked about that's dedicated to each customer. And that cloud tenant provides machine learning, behavioral and anomaly detection, native response and containment capabilities, a full sandboxing environment, and then real-time historical threat hunting. Also, when you onboard your endpoints, you have the ability to store up to 6 months of data for each and every one of your endpoints. So think about that. Other competitors, the most they can probably do is about 30 days. We provide 6 months of data for every single one of your endpoints, which allows you to go back in time and figure out where did an alert or an attack actually reside or how did it get in there. Also, here's this other another sensor that's built in the operating system. This is another feature that also has tamper protection. Once it is turned on, it is extremely difficult to disable or even mess with. And if somebody or something tries to do that, we have built-in controls to send what I like to say SOSs up to the cloud saying something bad's happening, someone needs to go take a look at this machine, and so on and so forth. Now, we didn't stop there. We decided, you know what, our EDR, we've done some fantastic things, and a couple of years back, we added traditional and leading auto investigation and remediation capabilities. So what is auto IR? So auto IR is the ability to auto heal endpoints. Now, when customers say, well, my current EDR has auto IR, and then you start asking questions of those third-party vendors, can you explain to me what your auto IR is? And they'll say, sure, when an alert comes in, we will auto isolate the machine. But let's face it, isolation is not remediation. What we do is we mimic the ideal steps a human would do to investigate and remediate a cyber threat. And we do this by running and reading and maintaining that. We here at Microsoft maintain runbooks up in the cloud. So what we provide is precise surgical endpoint remediation, and the end user that has it affected on their endpoint is not disrupted in any way, shape, or form. So what that means, the end user could be on the internet, could be moving on along those lines and not have an issue or being disconnected, but their machine is totally being remediated. Now, moving on to the last thing here is what we talk about is Microsoft Threat Experts. Is real quick, is a human entity where we allow customers the ability to come in and say, Microsoft, I need some help, or I need someone to take a look at our system. So we provide a service that allows our hunters to hunt on tenants. So what that means is we found a way of hunting and hunting on tenants that are not with no personal data. What that means is our researchers do not know they're hunting on specific tenants. We found a way of doing this with scrub data. Also, a second set of that is the ability to contact a hunter when, let's say, something extremely bad happens and you need our help. Moving on to the next slide here, because I want to make sure I get a lot of stuff here covered today. I want to talk about our Defender ATP infrastructure real quick. So as I said, each customer has a dedicated cloud, and each cloud has a library of IOAs, including behavioral heuristics and anomaly detection. Each Defender ATP relies on big data and the power of our intelligent security graph.
Sorry, John, to interrupt you. Can you please try to reshare your slides, because the quality of the slides is very poor and people can't read what's on the slides.
Absolutely. Let me know if you see it one more time. And it is shared right there. How about now?
Wait.
Coming.
No, it's still very blurry.
I'll try one more time. How about
now? It's the same. Let me see. Steve, can you try to share? You have the slides open as well. Can you share your screen? See if it's better. Sorry about this troubleshooting now, but people can't read what's on the slides. So, and this is a very busy slide here.
I see it good on my end.
Next slide. No, it's the same.
I see perfect on my end, by the way.
Okay. So for everyone, sorry, this is what we have right now. We will share the slides afterwards. Apologies. Let's keep going.
Steve, you want to control it? You want me to take over?
I can keep going with this. So you just talk and I'll not cure it.
So back to the infrastructure here. Each tenant has their own detonation chamber, and security teams log into the Defender ATP console to view security events and raw data to interact with their endpoints. Defender ATP is a key component of Microsoft Threat Protection that combines our other security services like Office ATP, Azure ATP, and Microsoft Cloud App Security. You have additional integration components with Azure Sentinel, Azure Security Center, Microsoft Information Protection, and Microsoft Endpoint Manager that allow new scenarios for customers. And then you can use our rich set of APIs that integrate with existing security controls, or like connecting to a SIEM or custom workflows, or even inject your own custom threat intelligence. Next slide, Steve. So we've been talking about Windows 10. Obviously, we own Windows 10. We know that we're part of the operating system. We also go back to Windows 7, but for older operating system, we have to install an agent. And Steve will talk about that in a few minutes. On the server side, we are built into Server 2019, and we also go back to 2008 R2 as well as agents. But here at Microsoft, we realize that we are not the only players on the field. So we have true cross-plat support on the Mac and Linux and Android, and later this year we will have full support for iOS as well. And like I said prior, these are all agents that we maintain here at Microsoft Engineer and provide for those platforms. Next. So let's take a minute real quick here and say, how do you manage these? How do you onboard these devices? Well, we take what's currently out there and what you currently use. So if you're in an Intune or MDM shop, you can do a Intune, like I said, or a config manager, or good old-fashioned group policy, or even just run local scripts and run those to onboard your endpoints. So whatever's out there you currently use, we absolutely support them. Steve, one more slide, please. So real quick, let's talk about some stages of deployment. When we publicize on our docs website more in depth here, but just to go high level here. So when you look at your stage of deployment, you prepare, you map out your environment. What endpoints are going to be onboarded into your environment? What are back controls? Who's going to have right to what endpoints? And then you start to figure out what components are we going to turn on initially into this solution. And then you move into the setup stage where it says, I'm going to make sure I have my licenses, and then set up the actual tenant, which literally takes maybe 5 to 15 minutes to set up a tenant. And then you move on to the onboarding phase. The onboarding phase is you choose what management component you're going to use to deploy the onboarding process, and then you define the actual policies which you are going to define and turn on and configure. Now, with that being said, I'm going to pass this over to Steve. Steve's going to give you some hands-on demos on what we and how we do this. So, Steve, over to you.
Okay, great. So this is what we're doing now is we're going into the sort of setup phase. So we'll assume that you've done the preparation, you've done your mapped your environment, you've defined your roles. With the setup, what we've got here and what you're seeing on the screen is effectively a clean tenant. So it's a brand new setup tenant. When you're setting up your tenant, you're either doing a trial, or you'll have had your Defender ATP or E5 license assigned to your Azure tenant. So when you first log into your tenant, one of the things you'll be asked is what you see on this screen. So your data storage location. Now, this is a really important thing that you want to choose when you first log it, when you first set up the tenant, because you cannot change it later on. So you'd set up US, UK, or Europe are the current options here. Once you define that is fixed. If you want to change that, you then have to go through a support process, and you have to offboard all of your clients and effectively create a new tenant. The data retention, however, is something you can choose later on. As John mentioned, we can have up to 6 months of data for all of your endpoints, but you can choose this. Now, we generally would recommend 6 months. So you keep it 180 days. That gives you the more value in terms of what it is you're analyzing. So just going down here, we've got some information around alert notifications. So you can add alerts, add notifications. So I could say medium alerts, select severity, medium. And what this does is it then creates a rule for you to it would then create a rule for you to then notify a person whenever a medium level alert comes in. And obviously you can do that based upon the different levels of alert. We're going to enhance the notification rules. So these are something you'd probably want to set up when you're first setting up your tenant in order to let the various people know within your SOC about things that are coming in. We'll come on to advanced features in a bit, because this is something we're going to really sort of go through. But just to explain a bit more about what else you see in the settings here, from a permissions point of view, this is where you define the RBAC, and we're going to go through RBAC later on. The APIs is you have the ability to connect to SIEM tool up to Defender ATP, so you can push alerts out to things like QRadar or Splunk. So you're getting that all-up view in your the SIEM tool. And then rules are where you're defining specific actions based upon certain circumstances within the environment. So custom detections, you might be looking for a certain file or a certain registry key being created that you want to generate alert on. You can create indicators based upon files or network locations. So all of these things are things you'd set up as you start using the product. And then device management, so you're onboarding and offboarding, and we'll come back to that. So in advanced features, the first thing you'd want to do here is turn on preview features. Now, preview features is something you would, when you set up your tenant fresh, you get the option to turn on preview features. So by doing that, it doesn't mean that you're enabling a lot of beta functionality in your tenant. You're not doing that. What you are doing is giving you the option to look at the new things that are coming out and giving the ability to look at the new functionality that we're promoting, and turn it on as you require. So you don't have to use it, even though you've got your preview features turned on. You do not have to use that functionality. We would recommend turning on as much as you can within here. So live response is the ability to query a machine through a command shell. We can automatically resolve alerts. John talked about the automation. The allow and unblock and file. This ties into Defender AV and allows you to specify indicators to block files, to stop people running certain files within your environment. Custom network indicators. This ties into network protection, again, which is part of Defender, the Defender endpoint. And John will touch on things like baselines, where you actually enable the policy at the endpoint to take advantage of these features. And then we have an integration into some of the other M365 tools. So Azure ATP, Office ATP, MCAS. We've got integration to Secure Score, so you get a view as to the overall status of your environment. Does it meet the recommendations that we put in place? And Intune. We're going to turn on the Intune connection here, because this will actually allow us to integrate into Intune and use Intune for doing the onboarding. So saving my preferences here. So at this point, if I go into my configuration management, so I've now got this connect to Intune. So actually, there's still. Oh, let's just make sure that's turned on. Okay, so it will take a few minutes to apply that. So at this point, we're gonna, if we look at the endpoint security, so this is what you see in Intune. So this is the endpoint security element in Intune. I'm just going to refresh that to see if that's pushed through. And this shows the integration between Intune and Defender ATP. Okay, so now we see it's synchronized. So that's literally just happened. We're going to turn on connect Windows 10 devices and above to Windows Defender ATP. We have two devices that are currently enrolled in Intune, but they're not onboarded into Defender ATP right now. So in order to onboard them into Defender, we go into here. We've got them. We've got this turned on. We'll save that with the connectors now set up, and we're going to now create a device configuration profile. So this device configuration profile is onboarding. Is what you set up in Intune to actually automate the onboarding of all the machines, or a selection of machines, depending on how you want to configure it, into Defender ATP and have that data reporting back. So we can turn on sample sharing. We're just going to expedite telemetry. Now, typically you wouldn't expedite telemetry in a production environment, but if you're doing a POC or you want to get the telemetry coming in really quickly, that's something you can apply. In assignments, we're just going to assign it to all users. You can obviously use groups that are set up within Intune and specify it's only going to onboard certain elements. You can set configuration rules, so there's certain properties that apply in terms of whether a machine's onboarded or not. And then we've got create. So we're going to now, we've created that onboarding profile. That's now assigned to those machines. And in the background, while we're talking, that process will take place. Now, that may take a while, so it may not complete before the end of this webinar. But what we're also going to do is show you the onboarding process for other elements. So within the onboarding side of device management, we've got the different supported OSs. So Windows 7 and 8.1, Windows 10, and as John says, Windows 10 does not require the deployment of any agent. For Server and Windows 7, you have to deploy something called the Microsoft Management Agent. And then for Mac, Linux, both of those are agents that are supported, and you deploy those out. What I'm going to do is, firstly, I'm going to show the process of using a local script for Windows 10. So this is something you'd use typically in a demo or a POC environment. You download the local script. In a production environment, as you saw, we've already linked Intune, but we can also use configuration management, and that would download a policy that you then apply into Config Manager. So I'm just going to download this script. So this script, what we see here is a zip file. And in that zip file, you get that script. Now, in the interest of time, I've already put that script onto one of my machines. So you see here, we've got the script that's there. And just to show you what the script looks like, you can see there's a script. And one of the things I've done specifically within this script is I'm adding a registry key. Now, this registry key allows us to tag a machine. And tagging a machine enables you to define it in the portal with a particular tag that can be used for filtering, but also within machine groups. So as part of this tag, we're going to tag this machine with London. We'll then use that when we set up our RBAC and use that tag to define London machine group. So like I say, this script is just been set up. Like I say, I've added that in. I'm just going to go into command prompt. Now, in this scenario, and I need to run it as administrator, but obviously if you're using a deployment tool like configuration manager, this would not be required. So Windows. Right, so I'm just going to run that. So it does a couple of things. It checks the privileges, checks everything's running. If just a point of reference, if you've already onboarded this machine to another Defender ATP service, you have to onboard it before you can onboard it onto a new one. You cannot just run the onboarding script on a machine that's already onboarded to move it into a new tenant. So that's now showing us as successfully onboarded. So, and we'll see that pop up in the tenant. The other one I wanted to show you was the onboarding of a server. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to onboard everything here. So here we've got the what's called the device monitoring, so the Microsoft monitoring agent. Now there's instructions here around this. The Microsoft monitoring agent is used by a lot of different Microsoft technologies. So it's used by ASC, by Log Analytics, by Operations Manager. We utilize this in order to feed telemetry and detection information up to the portal. And one of the things that's relevant is the workspace ID and the workspace key. This is really important when you're setting up the Microsoft monitoring agent. If I go onto my server here, so what we see here, I've downloaded the MMA setup, and the MMA setup is not, like I say, it's not exclusive to Defender ATP. It's used by a number of different Microsoft technologies. And I've just created a text file with my keys in there. So if I run the setup now. So I'm just going to now connect into Azure Log Analytics. So I'm connecting to an OMS workspace, and this OMS workspace is used for Defender. And here's my ASCII for my workspace ID. So let's just copy that out. And then the key. and you want to make sure this is set to Azure Commercial. So if you set up Microsoft Update, then the MMA will actually self-update. So at this point, that's now going through. Okay. So we'll just leave that running. Now let's see if we've actually got anything showing in device inventory. So our first Windows 10 machine, the one that we onboarded with the script, is showing in there, and you'll notice here it's tagged with London. So while the other things are moving forward and taking place, one of the other things you want to do is look at applying security baselines. So at this point, I'm going to hand back to John, because he's going to take you through this process of utilizing Intune in order to define the security baselines.
Thanks, Steve. So on the baseline side of the house, so customers have come to us and said, Microsoft, you have all these great features built into the operating system. What baselines, what security features should I be turning on and enabling as I'm rolling this out? So as Steve just showed you, you click within the console and it automatically launches and brings us into our Intune or MEM console, and it brings you into the Defender ATP baselines. So inside here, you would click on profile, create profile. You would type whatever the name it is you wanted to create it. So on here, we're just going to type in test. Then click on next. Now on the configuration settings, just give it 1 second here. It didn't pop up. There it goes. Okay, as you can see here, the first one that pops on top here is the attack surface reduction rules, like I talked about earlier. Now, important to note it here. I said there's about 18 ASR rules. These are not all 18. These are the ones that we recommend you turn on. And just so everyone is aware, we here at Microsoft recommend every single customer to put all ASR rules in audit mode. Audit mode allows you the ability to see, hey, this ASR rule would have triggered on this application, but it did not because it's just auditing. This allows customers like yourself to say, oh, I know that application. I allow that action to happen, and then create exceptions so when you put these rules into production. Once you have all your auditing out of the way, you come back into here and then you enable all of these or put them in block mode. And as you can see here, as I said earlier, these are very fine, granular operating system controls. Like, for instance, block Adobe Acrobat Reading from creating child processes, right? Block Office application from creating executable content. Block off all Office application from creating child process. So think about macros and how powerful they are and how needed, but they can also be used to attack an endpoint. And like I said, this allows the application to perform in the way they should be performing, but if they step out of their swim lane, the ASR rule will say, no, you can't do that, go back to what you should be doing. And as you can see, we provide these ASR rules. We also provide some other settings within the operating system that allow you to configure it. Another one I want to show everyone here is the actual Defender Next-Gen protection settings. And in here, we just want to make sure that customers have real-time protection turned on. This is using the power of the cloud, as I said earlier. Use our backend telemetry to say and protect your endpoints from any type of malicious content coming in. And then look at what type of quick scan we enable going forward. Ensure that cloud protection level is set to high and actual cloud delivered protection is on. This in turn works with real-time protection. Once you have these and review all these settings and you understand them, if you click this little info here, it tells you what they do for more information. Once you have these, and then you will click next. We skip over scope tags because we don't use them here on the Defender side. And then you assignment side, you add all devices. And once you have all the devices, you hit next. And at this point in time, you create, and then this policy will be deployed to the machines, all of the machines onboarded in your environment on the Windows 10 side. And then those components of the actual settings in the operating systems are enabled. Now I'm going to pass this back to Steve because Steve's going to talk about our RBAC controls built into the native console. Steve?
Great, thanks, John. Okay, so within RBAC, and I showed you this earlier, you have this permissions tab. Now, the thing to bear in mind is when you first set up Defender ATP, you need to have either global admin or security admin rights in order to create that tenant. That is not something you need going forward, because you can then define roles. Once you set these roles up, and you can see it's giving you a warning with read-only permissions. So something like security reader would lose rights to it once you turn this on. So once you set these roles up, you can then define other groups and users to have visibility without the need for global admin or security admin. So I'm just going to turn on these roles here. And you can see here, you've got the default administrator here that's got full permissions to service. So we're just going to add a couple of things here. So we'll try MDATP full access. So and you can see here, you've got the different roles you can enable. Now, because I'm enabling a full access role, I'm just going to turn on everything. So all my security operations, the exception handling, investigation, managed security settings. So managed security settings means I get access to all of these settings panel here. So potentially that may be something you, even for a full access account, you may not want them to be able to change settings. So that's something you'd need to consider. And that's part of the preparation stage deployment, where you're defining the roles, determining what it is you want to do. And then the live response capabilities. So the difference between basic, which is you can just do read commands within live response. So look at the processes are running, look at the scheduled tasks that have been set up, or advanced, where you can actually run full PowerShell scripts on the endpoint and do things like a memory download. So if I assign a user group here, and I've got full access, add that group. So now let's just do one more. So we'll do a read-only one as well. And here we've got our view data. We probably wouldn't want active remediation. Maybe we'd want alert investigation, and maybe we'd want basic live response capabilities. And here again, read only. And just for your benefit, these are just standard groups that are specified within Azure Active Directory. So I set these up, and then I'd add users into those groups. So I save that, and now I've got two groups defined, and they would determine who can access what within the console. But as well as defining the roles that people have, you maybe want to define what devices they can see, and this is where device groups come into play. So I'm going to add a new device group here, and I'm going to call it London machines or London devices. Remediation. John mentioned remediation. Remediation is a great thing for reducing the overhead on your SOC analysts. And what we've seen from remediation is typically people go into semi-automated, where their SOC analysts have to approve things. But over a period of time, they accept that the remediation is actually saving them a lot of energy, and they go into full remediation anyway. And in order to sort of the criteria for this machine group, so we set London devices. And if you remember, I specified a tag when I onboarded that machine. So that tag was London. And when I show my preview, you can see this is the machine. So showing the preview is not adding them to a group, it's just showing which machines this would affect. So, and then in the user access box, it's just, my London one hasn't come through yet. So literally I've just set this group up, so you can see this is the London management. So this is just a sync issue. So in this scenario, I'd simply add the London group into here, and then I click done, and then that would then, so London would then apply there, and it would show that these devices are only accessible by a user who's logged into that that London-based group. Actually, I think I probably know what that is. Bear with me a sec. I think I probably know where that is. Yeah, because I hadn't given that user group any rights. So the user group has to have role rights. So I'm just going to add that, and then we're done. So now we can see the London MDATP management. Okay, so that's very quickly setting up RBAC, and you can see this really allows you to define who sees what and what they can do within the tenant. Now, what we've done is we've walked you through a really quick setup, and you can see in the process of approximately 35 minutes, we've gone through setting up a new tenant, we've gone through some basic onboarding. You can see we've actually got machines onboarded already, and here the server is also showing now, the one that we did with the MMA. The Intune ones will take a bit longer, but they will come in as well. And John has walked you through some of the baseline stuff that we can create to ensure that those machines are set and they're secure as they should be. Now, from your point of view, you've set up this tenant, you've got everything ready to go, but maybe you want to understand a bit about how the alerts look and understand a bit about how to investigate an incident. And that's really where something like the evaluation lab comes into play. So the evaluation lab is a technology that we build into the portal, and it's really designed for a proof of concept lab. So when I go through the setup here, you can see I've got a lab configuration, so I can specify a number of machines. Now, the important thing to notice here is that these machines are fixed values. So when you set this up, you get these machines for a certain period. Now, you don't have to start all the machines at the same time. You can start one machine and then a week later start another machine, but they will only last for a specific period of time. So we're just going to leave that as 4 devices for 48 hours each. It's not designed as a long-term solution. It's really designed for you to do a proof of concept and evaluate how everything's going to work. We've got our simulated agents. So we've got agreements with Attack IQ and Safe Breach. So you can actually utilize a simulator within the Defender ATP lab and see real life attacks happening through these simulator technologies. So I'm just going to let me just accept these terms here. So we now view the EULA for Attack IQ. So now here we'd specify the we can put details in here. See, so we've got active vendors here, and we can set up the lab. So here you can see we've got our provision devices, and when we add a device, what that does is it will actually build that device for me. So it builds it as a virtual machine. And the important thing to notice here, as well as building it as a virtual machine, it will also take the process of onboarding into Defender ATP, and everything will be turned on in it. So all of the Windows security will all automatically be enabled and set at the optimum configuration. Just small point of note, this password, you only get to see it once. So you can copy it out, and then you use that, paste it into something. If you do forget the password, you do have the ability to reset it. So I can reset the password on that machine. So it's not like it's the be all and end all, but then it will walk you through the process to understand how that will work. We can look at the simulations and tutorials here, so we can see the simulations that we've provided for you. So as Microsoft, we've got simulations that we've provided, which are files and fileless-based attacks, and as well as the simulations that have been provided by the Attack IQ and Safe Breach simulations. So let's just come back to that. And there's also some tutorials, so it's just taking a bit of time to load. So we can come back to that. It will take you through how to review incidents. It will take you through how to hunt for threats. All of this, and then it will produce an evaluation report as to how everything has gone. So it really helps you understand how to use the technology. So that's something you'd want to look at when you first set up the tenant. And then finally, we're just gonna, I'm just gonna flick over to another tenant I've got here, because I wanted to show you the, what we call the threat and vulnerability management. Now, John mentioned it, so I'm showing you on another tenant because it will take a few moments to populate all this data. But you can see here, this is the sort of thing you would be looking at when you first log onto your tenant. You look at your when you first create the tenant, when you've got machines onboarding, you'll be able to see your exposure score, the score for devices. So this is the Microsoft Secure Score that we enabled in the advanced features, and the top security recommendations. This is really important because it allows you to see what you can do to improve your posture. What are the things that is most going to affect your score? And you see one of the things here is update the Windows 10 OS. So that's fairly obvious, but this is relevant. So block all Office applications from creating child processes. This is a attack surface reduction rule that you would create to help manage that process. And as John mentioned, you may want to put it in audit mode first to understand where it's going to affect you. But once you've done that, you then apply a block mode to really lock down your environment. And then you can see the view of the top vulnerable event, or the top events and top vulnerable software, and the machines that have been affected and the vulnerabilities that are associated with them. These vulnerabilities are linked into the vulnerability database, the CVS database. So you can see here all of the vulnerabilities that are listed there against that machine and the severity. You'll also see whether there's a public exploit against that vulnerability, which obviously makes it more of an issue. So with that, we've gone through a real whirlwind of demo in terms of setting everything up for you. I'm just going to hand back to Heike now. So we've got a few minutes just to ask a few questions and understand if there's any sort of bursting issues for you.
Excellent. Yeah, I'm going to take over, Steve. Thanks.
Okay.
Steve.
Thank you so much, first of all. Yeah, John, I don't know, do you have some questions that you would like to bring up? I have a couple that I saw. I mean, we have so many questions. The team did an amazing job answering almost all of them, and we will follow up on the tech community with the remaining ones. Do you have anything that stick out to you, John?
No, I'm good. I think we covered a lot in a short amount of time, and I think we're good. Steve, how about you?
I got a few that it's like, two is, the one is it mandatory to have Intune for endpoint onboarding? I think you can clarify the question.
Yeah, so with Intune is a great technology in terms of integrating into Defender ATP. It will give you integration on compliance levels. You can also do something called risk-based conditional access. So Intune drives that process to allow you to actually restrict what an endpoint can access based upon the threat level of it. But it's not essential to have Intune. So if you don't have Intune, if you have another MDM, or you have no solution or SCCM, as we showed on the slide at the beginning, there are different ways you can onboard. So you can use an MDM, you can use config manager with a policy, you can use group policy. So we have one of the options for onboarding is to utilize group policy, and you effectively publish a script into a group policy share that then gets run, or you can just run a local script. And that's what I showed you with the Windows 10 machine where we onboarded that.
Thank you. So, and then the other one, it was more about what operating systems and such are supported, what distros and versions. So I recommend that everybody goes to our documentation. It's aka.ms/MDATP docs, and you can find the supported operating system and all, for instance, the distros for Linux listed out there. It's too much to just call them out now here out loud. So, and I think with that, I'm closing the webinar again. Thanks, John and Steve. Some reminders before we are ending the call. We have a busy schedule on webinars coming up. So tomorrow is Microsoft CyberX. And then further in September, we have more Azure Sentinel webinars. One is enabling entity behavior analytics at hunting for insider threats. The other one is unleash your Azure Sentinel automation Jedi tricks and build logic apps playbooks like a boss. And then the schedule for October is also out, but I want to remember everyone that next week is Ignite. So please, if you haven't, sign up and register and enjoy a week of a lot of content. And then for details and registrations for the security webinars, go to aka.ms/security webinars. Again, if we missed to answer your questions, we will go ahead and do this in the MDATP tech community under aka.ms/MDATPTC. And yes, thanks for everyone who made this possible, helped answer. So of course the presenters, but then also the rest of the team in the background. Amazing job. Thanks everyone, and thanks for attending and being part of the community and join us on those webinars. Hope to see you soon again. Goodbye.